The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban streets of Pine Grove as Sarah Bennett's blue Honda Civic cruised smoothly along Cedar Avenue. Her 12-year-old daughter Maya sat in the passenger seat, still humming the piano piece she had just mastered during her lesson. The peaceful moment between mother and daughter was about to change drastically. Sarah was a well-known figure in Pine Grove. At 35, she had built a reputation as both a dedicated single mother and a respected community organizer who worked tirelessly at the local youth center. Her gentle brown eyes and warm smile made her instantly approachable, while her quiet confidence commanded respect from everyone she met. "Mom, can we stop for ice cream?" Maya asked, her bright eyes hopeful as they passed the local ice cream parlor. She was still wearing her school uniform, a neat blue skirt and white blouse, her backpack filled with sheet music resting at her feet. "Not today, sweetie. We need to get home and start dinner," Sarah replied, checking her rearview mirror. That's when she noticed the police cruiser trailing behind her car. The red and blue lights suddenly flashed to life, filling her mirror with bursts of color. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but she remained calm. She had done nothing wrong, and she knew exactly what to do. Signaling properly, she pulled over to the side of the road, positioning her car safely away from traffic. She placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. "Maya, stay calm and remember what we talked about," Sarah said softly to her daughter, who had gone quiet, her previous cheerfulness replaced by nervous tension. Officer James Miller approached the driver's side window, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. He was a tall man with a stern face and cold blue eyes, his uniform pressed perfectly, badge gleaming in the sunlight. Sarah noticed he had his hand resting on his holster, a detail that made her stomach tighten. "License and registration," Officer Miller demanded without introduction or explanation for the stop. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" Sarah asked politely, maintaining eye contact through her side mirror. "Your taillight's broken." "Documents." Now, his tone was sharp, unnecessarily aggressive for such a routine stop. Sarah nodded calmly, though her heart was racing. "I'm going to reach for my purse in the back seat to get my license," she narrated her movements clearly, just as she had taught Maya to do. "Maya, honey, could you open the glove compartment and hand me the registration?" As Maya reached for the glove compartment, Officer Miller suddenly barked, "Don't move," causing the girl to freeze in fear. "Officer, that's my 12-year-old daughter," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite her growing concern. "She's just reaching for the registration as requested." Miller's face hardened. "Step out of the vehicle." "Sir, I don't understand. I've done nothing wrong, and I have my young daughter with me." Sarah maintained her composure, though she could feel Maya trembling beside her. "I said step out of the vehicle." Miller's voice rose, his face reddening with what seemed like disproportionate anger. Sarah, knowing her rights but also aware of the volatile situation, carefully considered her next move. She could see Maya had quietly taken out her phone and was holding it in her lap, something they had discussed during their many conversations about interactions with law enforcement. "Officer Miller," Sarah read his nameplate. "I can see your badge number is 4721. I'm happy to provide my documents, but I'd like to know why I'm being asked to exit my vehicle during a routine traffic stop. If you could please call your supervisor." Before she could finish her sentence, Miller's demeanor changed completely. His face contorted with rage, and he reached for the door handle, yanking it open with unnecessary force. "You people always think you know the law better than us," he spat, his previous professional facade crumbling entirely. Sarah remained still, her hands visible on the wheel, fully aware that Maya was now recording everything. Other cars were slowing down as they passed, and several pedestrians had stopped to watch the scene unfold. The situation was balancing on a knife's edge, and Sarah knew the next few moments would be crucial. She had always taught Maya about dignity, rights, and proper ways to handle difficult situations. Now, she needed to be the example her daughter needed while ensuring they both stayed safe. As Officer Miller reached toward her, Sarah took a deep breath, preparing herself for what would come next. Officer Miller's grip tightened around Sarah's arm as he forcefully pulled her from the car. Sarah's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady, thinking of Maya watching from the passenger seat. "Officer, you're hurting me," Sarah said calmly, even as pain shot through her arm. "This is unnecessary force, and it's all being recorded." The mention of recording seemed to anger Miller even more. He spun Sarah around to face him, his face red with rage. "Hand over your phone," he demanded, apparently unaware that it was Maya, not Sarah, who was recording. "I don't have a phone in my hands, Officer Miller," Sarah replied truthfully, showing her empty palms. "But I do have the right to record any interaction with law enforcement. That's the law." By now, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Mrs. Rodriguez, who owned the local bakery, had stopped sweeping her storefront. Mr. Thompson, the retired school teacher, stood with his walking stick, shaking his head at the scene. Several people had their phones out, recording the escalating situation. Maya watched from inside the car, her hands trembling but holding her phone steady, just as her mother had taught her. She wanted to cry, but she remembered her mother's words. Sometimes being brave means being scared, but doing the right thing anyway. "I ran your plates," Miller said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You've got a history of complaints against officers." Sarah stood her ground. Those complaints were about police misconduct, and they were all validated by internal affairs. "I work with the Community Relations Board, Officer Miller. I know my rights and—" "Shut up," Miller shouted, spraying spittle. His hand moved to his belt, causing several onlookers to gasp. "You're interfering with a police investigation." "What investigation?" Sarah asked, maintaining her composure. "You said this was about a taillight, which I'm certain isn't broken. I had my car inspected last week." More police cars were arriving now, their sirens silent but lights flashing. Officer Miller's behavior was becoming more erratic as his backup approached. He seemed to realize he had lost control of the situation. "Get back in your car," he ordered, completely reversing his previous command to exit the vehicle. "Officer, I'm happy to comply with reasonable requests, but you need to be clear about what you want," Sarah responded. "I suggest we wait for your supervisor to." Miller's hand shot up, preparing to strike. Sarah's eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. Maya screamed from inside the car, "Mom!" Just then, a new voice cut through the tension. "Miller, stand down." Sergeant Diana Chen had arrived on the scene. She was a veteran officer known for her fair handling of community relations. She quickly assessed the situation. Multiple civilians recording, a visibly distressed child in the car, and one of her officers clearly out of control. "Step back, Miller," Chen ordered firmly. "Miss Bennett, are you all right?" Sarah nodded, relief washing over her face at seeing a familiar officer. She had worked with Sergeant Chen on community outreach programs before. "Maya, sweetie, it's okay," Sarah called to her daughter, who was still recording but had tears streaming down her face. Miller wasn't done yet. His pride wounded by Chen's intervention, he made one last desperate move. "She's resisting arrest," he shouted, lunging forward. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Miller's hand swung toward Sarah's face. Sarah, trained in self-defense through her community work, instinctively raised her arm in a blocking motion, deflecting the blow while stepping back. The movement was defensive, not aggressive, exactly as she'd been taught. The crowd gasped. Multiple phones captured the moment. Sergeant Chen moved swiftly, grabbing Miller's arm and pulling him back. "That's enough." Chen's voice carried authority that Miller couldn't ignore. "Miller, get in your car. Now. You're done here." The other responding officers quickly took control of the scene. One approached Maya's side of the car, speaking softly to reassure her. Another began dispersing the crowd while taking witness statements. Sarah stood tall, her dignity intact despite the ordeal. She had shown her daughter how to stand up for one's rights while remaining calm and respectful, even in the face of injustice. But as she looked at Maya's tearful face through the car window, she knew this incident was far from over. This was just the beginning. The next few minutes on Cedar Avenue became a whirlwind of activity. Officer Miller, despite Sergeant Chen's direct order, wasn't backing down easily. His face had turned an alarming shade of red, and sweat dripped down his temples despite the cool evening air. "You can't tell me what to do," Miller shouted at Chen, his voice cracking with anger. "This woman has been causing trouble for our department for months." Sarah remained perfectly still, her eyes fixed on Maya in the car. The young girl was still recording, her hands steady now despite her tear-stained cheeks. Around them, at least 15 bystanders had their phones raised, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. Sergeant Chen stepped between Miller and Sarah. "Officer Miller, this is your final warning. Return to your vehicle or face immediate suspension." Miller's response shocked everyone present. Instead of complying, he shoved past Chen, his hand raised high. Before anyone could react, he slapped Sarah hard across the face, the sound echoing through the street like a gunshot. Maya screamed from inside the car, "Mom, no." But Sarah Bennett was not a woman who would be victimized. As Miller's hand came down for a second strike, Sarah's self-defense training kicked in. She stepped to the side, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to direct him away from her. Miller stumbled, his balance thrown off by his own aggressive motion. "That's assault on an officer," Miller screamed, regaining his footing. "No," Sergeant Chen's voice cut through like steel. "That was self-defense against police brutality, caught on multiple cameras." She nodded to two other officers who had just arrived. "Take his badge and gun. Officer Miller is officially relieved of duty." The crowd that had gathered burst into applause, but Sarah wasn't celebrating. She rushed to her car, opening the passenger door to comfort Maya, who was shaking but had managed to keep recording the entire incident. "Baby, are you okay?" Sarah asked, wrapping her arms around her daughter. Maya nodded bravely. "I got it all, Mom. Just like you taught me. Everything's on video." Mrs. Rodriguez from the bakery approached with a bottle of water and a cold pack for Sarah's cheek, which was starting to swell. "I called Channel 5 News," she said quietly. "They're on their way. This needs to be seen." Miller, now disarmed and badgeless, was being led to a police car. He kept shouting about conspiracies and troublemakers, his words becoming more incoherent with each passing moment. Sergeant Chen approached Sarah and Maya, her face filled with genuine concern. "Miss Bennett, I apologize on behalf of the department. We need your statement. But first, would you like medical attention?" Sarah touched her cheek gently. "Yes, I think that would be wise. Documentation is important." She looked at Maya. "But I need someone to take care of my daughter first." "I'm not leaving you, Mom," Maya said firmly, showing a strength beyond her years. Mr. Thompson, the retired teacher, stepped forward. "I've already called your sister Patricia," he told Sarah. "She's on her way. And I got the whole thing on video too, in case you need another angle for the investigation." As if on cue, Patricia's red SUV came screeching around the corner. Sarah's sister, a legal aid attorney, jumped out before the car had fully stopped. Sarah, Maya, Patricia rushed over, her law degree and protective instincts both kicking into high gear. "Don't say anything else until we get you checked out. I'm calling Marcus from Civil Rights Legal Defense right now." The evening news vans were starting to arrive, their satellite dishes stretching into the darkening sky. The story of a respected community organizer being assaulted by a police officer in front of her young daughter would soon be making headlines. Sarah held Maya close, looking at the gathering crowd of supporters, the news crews, and the police officers who had done the right thing. This incident would change things, not just for her family, but for the whole community. "We're okay, baby," she whispered to Maya. "And we're going to make sure something good comes from this. That's what we do. We turn bad situations into chances for positive change." Maya nodded against her mother's shoulder, still clutching her phone with its valuable footage. The video would soon show the world not just the violence of one officer, but also the strength of a mother and daughter who stood their ground with dignity and courage. The emergency room at Pine Grove General Hospital buzzed with activity as Sarah Bennett sat on the examination bed. The fluorescent lights highlighted the angry red mark on her cheek where Officer Miller had struck her. Maya refused to leave her mother's side, still holding her phone like a shield. Dr. Amanda Torres carefully examined Sarah's face, taking photos of the injury from multiple angles. "You'll have some bruising, Ms. Bennett, but thankfully nothing's broken. I'm documenting everything for your records." Patricia, Sarah's sister, paced the small room while talking on her phone. "Yes, Marcus, we need you here now. My sister was assaulted by a police officer in broad daylight." "Yes, multiple videos." "No," she defended herself legally. She was in full lawyer mode, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. Outside the hospital room, reporters gathered in the waiting area, hoping for a statement. The video of the incident, first uploaded by Mrs. Rodriguez, had already gone viral. Local news stations were running it on repeat, and social media was exploding with outrage. "Mom," Maya said softly, showing her phone screen to Sarah. "We're trending on Twitter. People are calling you a hero." Sarah shook her head gently. "I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I just did what was necessary to protect us both. More importantly, how are you feeling?" Before Maya could answer, Sergeant Chen knocked on the doorframe. "May I come in?" she asked respectfully. Patricia moved to block her path. "My sister's not making any statements without her lawyer present." "I understand," Chen replied, remaining in the doorway. "I just wanted to inform you that Officer Miller has been suspended without pay pending investigation. We've recovered all his body cam footage, including several other incidents that, well, let's just say this wasn't his first time acting inappropriately." The news brought a small measure of relief to the room. Dr. Torres finished her examination and handed Sarah an ice pack. "Keep this on for 20 minutes at a time. The swelling should go down by tomorrow, but the bruising might last a week or two." Suddenly, Maya's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was her best friend Jasmine. "Mom, everyone at school is talking about what happened. Jasmine says our classmates are organizing a protest at the police station tomorrow." Sarah and Patricia exchanged worried looks. "Honey," Sarah began carefully, "while I appreciate their support, we need to handle this the right way, through proper channels." Just then, Marcus Washington, the civil rights attorney, strode into the room. He was a tall man with kind eyes and gray temples, carrying a briefcase that had seen many similar cases. "Sarah, Maya," he greeted them warmly. "I've already started the paperwork. This case is going to make a difference." "I don't want money, Marcus," Sarah said firmly. "I want change, real change." Marcus nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's exactly why we need to handle this carefully. Your story has the power to push for meaningful reforms, but we have to do it right." The hospital room became a temporary command center. Patricia took statements from everyone present. Dr. Torres provided detailed medical reports. Sergeant Chen shared what she could about the internal investigation. Maya carefully backed up her video to multiple secure locations, just as her mother had taught her. Outside, the crowd of supporters had grown. The evening news showed people gathering peacefully at the hospital entrance, holding signs that read "Justice for Sarah" and "Protect our community." Mrs. Rodriguez had brought coffee and pastries from her bakery to share with the supporters. Sarah watched the scene from her hospital window, holding the ice pack to her face. Despite the pain and trauma of the day, she felt a strange sense of purpose. This incident, horrible as it was, could be the catalyst for the changes she'd been working toward in her community. "Maya," she called to her daughter, who was showing Marcus the video footage. "Come here, sweetheart." Maya joined her mother at the window, and Sarah wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "See all those people down there? They're not just here for us. They're here because they believe in the same thing we do, that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." Maya leaned against her mother, finally allowing herself to relax slightly. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" Sarah kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Yes, baby. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to make things better." 1 week after the incident, Sarah Bennett's living room had transformed into an unofficial command center. The bruise on her face had faded to a yellowish green, but the community's determination for justice had only grown stronger. Marcus Washington sat in Sarah's favorite armchair, surrounded by stacks of papers and open laptops. "The internal affairs investigation is moving quickly," he explained, adjusting his reading glasses. Officer Miller's body camera footage revealed a pattern of similar incidents. Sarah nodded, sipping her morning tea. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, working on a school project about civil rights. The past week had changed their lives in unexpected ways. News vans still parked outside their house, and Sarah's phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests. "Look at this, Mom," Maya called out, turning her laptop screen. "The video has over 5 million views now. People from other cities are sharing their own stories in the comments." Patricia burst through the front door, carrying a box of fresh donuts from Mrs. Rodriguez's bakery. "You won't believe what just happened at City Hall," she announced excitedly. "The city council called for an emergency meeting about police reform. They want you to speak, Sarah. Sarah set down her tea carefully. When? Tomorrow morning. They're fast-tracking new training programs and accountability measures. Patricia distributed the donuts while talking. The police chief is under serious pressure. 3 other officers have come forward about Miller's past behavior. Maya raised her hand like she was in school. Can I come too? I want to tell them what I saw. The adults exchanged glances. Sarah moved to sit beside her daughter. Are you sure, sweetie? It might be scary speaking in front of all those people. I'm not scared anymore, Mom, Maya replied with determination. You taught me that speaking up is important. Marcus nodded approvingly. Maya's video evidence is crucial. Having her speak would be powerful, but only if she feels ready. The doorbell rang. It was Sergeant Chen, holding a thick folder. She had become an unexpected ally in their fight for justice. Sarah, I have the complete report from Internal Affairs, she said, stepping inside. It's worse than we thought. Miller had 17 complaints filed against him in the past 3 years. 17? Patricia exclaimed, nearly choking on her donut. And he was still on active duty. That's exactly why we need systemic change, Sarah stated firmly. It's not just about one officer, it's about the whole system that protected him. Maya looked up from her project. My teacher says we're studying this in social studies next week. She's using our case as an example of peaceful resistance and community action. Sarah felt a mix of pride and sadness. Her daughter was learning such important lessons, but in such a difficult way. Still, Maya's strength amazed her every day. Marcus started organizing his papers. Here's the plan for tomorrow. Sarah, you'll speak first, presenting the community's demands for reform. Maya, if you're comfortable, you'll show your video and share your experience. Then we'll have other community members testify. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at the door, which had been left open. She carried a tray of fresh coffee. The whole neighborhood is coming to support you, she announced. We've already filled 3 buses. The room buzzed with energy as they planned their strategy. Sarah watched everyone working together. Her daughter, her sister, their lawyer, their neighbors, and even a police sergeant, all united for positive change. There's one more thing, Sergeant Chen added, pulling out another document. The department is implementing immediate changes. All officers must now wear body cameras that can't be turned off, and we're starting mandatory de-escalation training next week. Sarah smiled, feeling hopeful for the first time in days. This is how change happens, she said, looking at Maya. Not through violence or hatred, but through unity and determination. Maya hugged her mother tightly. You're not just my hero anymore, Mom. You're everybody's hero now. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. We're all heroes when we stand up for what's right. Tomorrow, we're going to make our voices heard and make sure this never happens to another family again. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the room full of people working together for justice. Sometimes, Sarah realized, the worst moments in life could lead to the most important changes. The city council chambers were packed to capacity that morning. Every seat was filled, and people lined the walls. Sarah Bennett sat in the front row with Maya beside her, both dressed in simple but professional attire. The bruise on Sarah's face had faded but was still visible, a silent testimony to what had brought them all here. Police Chief Richardson looked uncomfortable at the podium, tugging at his collar as he addressed the crowd. After a thorough investigation of the incident involving Officer Miller, we have uncovered disturbing evidence of misconduct spanning several years. The room fell silent as screens around the chamber displayed a timeline of complaints against Officer Miller. 17 red dots marked the incidents, each representing a family's pain, each ignored until now. Maya squeezed her mother's hand as their video began playing on the large screens. The footage was even more shocking on the giant display. Officer Miller's rage, Sarah's calm dignity, and the moment of violence captured perfectly from multiple angles. Mom, Maya whispered, look at the chief's face. He's actually watching it this time. She was right. Chief Richardson's expression had changed from defensive to deeply troubled as he watched the scene unfold. When the video ended, he cleared his throat. Ms. Bennett, would you please address the council? Sarah stood gracefully, her head held high. As she walked to the podium, hundreds of phones recorded her every move. This wasn't just a local story anymore, it had become national news. I stand before you not just as a victim of police brutality, Sarah began, her voice clear and strong, but as a member of this community who believes in positive change. The issue isn't just Officer Miller. It's a system that allowed him to continue harming people despite 17 previous complaints. From the back of the room, Mrs. Rodriguez stood up. My complaint was number 3, she called out. 2 years ago, he threatened my son for simply walking home at night. Others began standing up too, sharing their stories. The council members looked increasingly uncomfortable as person after person described similar encounters with Officer Miller. Sergeant Chen approached the podium with a new stack of files. We've completed our internal investigation, she announced. Officer Miller's body camera revealed 42 additional incidents of misconduct that were never reported. Many victims were too afraid to come forward. The room erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. Chief Richardson's face had turned pale. Marcus Washington, who had been taking detailed notes, stood up. The Civil Rights Legal Defense Team has prepared a comprehensive reform proposal, he stated, distributing documents to the council members. We need immediate action. Maya tugged at her mother's sleeve. Can I speak now? Sarah looked at her daughter with pride and concern. Are you sure? Maya nodded and approached the podium. At 12 years old, she barely reached the microphone, but her voice rang out clear and strong. I'm Maya Bennett. A week ago, I watched an officer hurt my mom for no reason, but I also watched my mom stay strong and do the right thing. She taught me that when bad things happen, we don't fight back with anger, we fight back by making things better. The room fell silent again, everyone listening to this young girl's wisdom. I don't want other kids to be scared of the police, Maya continued. I want them to feel protected. My mom always says that change starts with speaking up, so that's what I'm doing. Tears were flowing freely in the chamber now. Even some of the council members were wiping their eyes. Chief Richardson stood up again. In light of all this evidence, I am announcing immediate changes. Officer Miller has been terminated, and we're reopening every case where complaints were filed against him. Furthermore, we're implementing new training programs and creating a civilian oversight committee. Sarah wrapped her arm around Maya as they returned to their seats. The investigation had revealed more than just one officer's misconduct. It had exposed a broken system, but it had also shown the power of a community united for change. Patricia leaned over and whispered, "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Sarah nodded, watching as the council began discussing the reform proposals. "Yes," she replied. "This is how real change starts, with truth, courage, and a community that refuses to stay silent." 3 weeks after the city council meeting, Pine Grove Community Center was busier than ever. Sarah Bennett stood at the entrance, greeting people as they arrived for the first Community Police Relations workshop. The center's main hall had been transformed, with round tables set up to encourage conversation between officers and residents. "Mom, the news crews are here again," Maya called out, helping to pin name tags on visitors. She had become surprisingly comfortable with the media attention, though Sarah made sure it didn't interfere with her schoolwork. Sergeant Chen arrived with a group of young officers, all wearing casual clothes instead of uniforms. "This is Officer Rodriguez, Mrs. Rodriguez's son," she introduced a young man. "He just graduated from the academy and specifically requested to serve in this community." Mrs. Rodriguez rushed forward to hug her son, tears in her eyes. "Ay, Hijo. Now this is the kind of police officer we need." The atmosphere was different from the tense council meeting. People were talking, sharing stories, and actually listening to each other. At one table, a veteran officer played chess with a teenager while discussing how to handle difficult situations. At another, elderly residents shared their experiences with young recruits. Patricia arrived carrying boxes of supplies. "The new Civilian Oversight Committee applications are here," she announced. "We've already received hundreds of volunteers." Sarah smiled, remembering how just weeks ago, these same people had been afraid to speak up. Now they were actively participating in creating change. Maya had set up a special table for young people. "We're starting a youth advisory council," she explained to anyone who would listen. "Kids need to know their rights and how to stay safe, but we also want to help build trust." The local high school principal, Dr. Johnson, approached Sarah. "Your daughter's incredible," he said, She's inspired a whole movement at school. The students are organizing workshops, making informational videos, and even starting a peer support group. Sarah watched Maya proudly. Her daughter had turned trauma into purpose, fear into strength. The incident that could have broken them had instead made their community stronger. Suddenly, everyone's phones buzzed simultaneously. Breaking news. Officer Miller had been formally charged with multiple counts of assault and civil rights violations. The investigation had uncovered evidence going back 5 years. "This is just the beginning," Marcus Washington announced, walking in with more legal documents. 10 other departments across the state are now reviewing their complaint procedures. "Sarah, your case is creating a ripple effect." The workshop continued with role-playing exercises. Officers and residents switched roles, trying to understand each other's perspectives. There was laughter, some tears, and most importantly, real dialogue. "Look at this, Mom," Maya said, showing Sarah her phone. Their story had inspired similar programs in other cities. Hashtag Community First was trending nationally, with people sharing stories of positive police-community interactions. Mrs. Rodriguez's bakery had provided refreshments, and during the break, people mingled freely. Old barriers seemed to be breaking down. Even some of the most skeptical residents were engaging in conversation with officers. "Sarah," Sergeant Chen called out, "the new training program starts next week. Would you and Maya consider speaking to our cadets? They need to hear your story firsthand." Before Sarah could answer, Maya jumped in. "Can I show them my video presentation? I added interviews with other kids about their experiences with police." Sarah hugged her daughter close. "Of course you can, sweetheart. Your voice matters just as much as anyone else's." As the evening wound down, Sarah stood at the podium to address the crowd. The room fell quiet, every face turned toward her with respect and attention. "A month ago, I experienced something that no one should ever go through," she began. "But look around this room now. See how we turn pain into progress, fear into friendship, and anger into action. This is what community looks like." She gestured to Maya, who joined her at the podium. "My daughter taught me something important through all of this. She showed me that even our youngest community members have wisdom to share if we just listen." The room erupted in applause. As Sarah looked out at the faces, officers and residents, young and old, all united in purpose, she knew that real change was happening, not through force or fear, but through understanding and unity. This was how healing began. This was how communities grew stronger. This was how justice really worked. 6 months had passed since that fateful day on Cedar Avenue. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Pine Grove's newly established Community Justice Center, where Sarah Bennett now served as executive director. The building, once an abandoned library, had been transformed into a symbol of positive change. "Mom, they're here," Maya called out excitedly. A group of students from her middle school filed into the main hall, followed by 3 police officers in their new community outreach uniforms, light blue shirts instead of the traditional dark ones. Sarah smiled at the sight. Monthly student police dialogue sessions had become a regular event, thanks to Maya's youth leadership program. Her daughter, now 13, had found her calling as a young activist and community builder. "Welcome, everyone," Sarah greeted the group. "Today we're celebrating something special. Officer Miller's trial ended yesterday, and I have some news to share." The room grew quiet. Everyone knew this case had become a turning point for their community and had sparked changes across the country. "The jury found him guilty on all counts," Sarah announced. "But more importantly, our new police reforms have been officially adopted by 20 other cities. What happened here in Pine Grove is helping communities everywhere." Mrs. Rodriguez, now head of the Civilian Oversight Committee, stood up with tears in her eyes. 6 months ago, we were afraid to speak up. Now look at us. We're training other cities on how to build trust between police and communities." Sergeant Chen, recently promoted to captain, entered with more good news. "The new training program has shown amazing results," she reported. "Complaints are down by 80%, and community satisfaction is at an all-time high. The Pine Grove model, as they're calling it, is being studied nationwide." Maya proudly displayed the wall of photographs she had created. The first photo showed her mother's bruised face from that terrible day, but each following picture told a story of transformation: community meetings, training sessions, youth programs, and celebrations of progress. The best part, Maya explained to the students, is that we didn't just fix one problem. We created something new and better. Patricia arrived with Marcus Washington, both carrying fresh boxes of books for the center's legal resource library. The governor just signed the Sarah Bennett Act, Marcus announced. Every police department in the state now must have civilian oversight and mandatory de-escalation training. Sarah felt overwhelmed with emotion. The incident that could have left her bitter had instead sparked a movement of positive change. She watched as officers and students sat together, sharing stories and ideas, no fear or tension between them. Officer Rodriguez, Mrs. Rodriguez's son, had become one of their best success stories. He led the youth outreach program, showing how proper training and community connection could create a new kind of police officer. Ms. Bennett, a young student, raised her hand. Is it true that your story is going to be in our new history books? Sarah nodded. Yes, but it's not just my story. It's everyone's story. It's about what happens when people come together to make things better instead of letting anger take over. Maya added, and my video is being used in police academies across the country. They're learning that respect and understanding work better than force and fear. The center buzzed with activity as more people arrived for the day's programs: legal aid clinics, community mediation sessions, youth workshops, and police community dialogue groups. What had started with one terrible incident had grown into a movement for positive change. Mom, Maya said softly, hugging her mother, remember what you told me that day? That we turn bad situations into chances for positive change? Sarah held her daughter close. Yes, baby, and look what you helped create. Captain Chen joined them, smiling. The real victory isn't just in the changes we made to the police department. It's in the trust we built, the understanding we've created, and the community we've become. As Sarah looked around the busy center, she saw the truth in those words. The bruises had healed, the anger had transformed into action, and fear had given way to hope. This wasn't just an ending to their story, it was a beginning for countless others. This is what justice really looks like, Sarah said to everyone gathered. Not just punishment for wrongdoing, but creating a community where everyone feels safe, respected, and heard. The morning sun continued to shine through the windows, illuminating faces full of hope and determination. In Pine Grove, they had learned the most important lesson of all, that true change comes not from tearing things down, but from building something better together.